It has been over 2 months since we got the 1.5 FAQ that has really shaken the game up, and almost 60 days since I put out a speculative tier list with where I thought all of the factions were going to land in the new world. How have I done? Well, let's have a look. This video is brought to you by the Tsn Arena, the #1 place to go for Old World and Age of Sigmar tournaments here in Nottingham. Rob runs a wide range of events, from 500 point forays all the way up to 2,600 point mega battles, where single models like dragons have a less pronounced effect on the game and you see bigger bricks of infantry. Of course, there's still the normal 2,000 point battles, but even in there's some room for experimentation, with fan favourite events like the river battles going incredibly quickly. The TSN Arena is located on the outskirts of Nottingham City Centre near the Motorpoint Arena, and it is conveniently located in the middle of plenty of parking spots within walking distance of multiple hotels and 2 great places to go for food, including Snenton Market, which has a wide range of options. So, if you're interested in going to a venue where there's plenty of table space, the comfiest chairs that I've been in at any venue, and free drinks all weekend, go to www.tsnarena.com to buy your tickets today. Link in the description. How are we going to determine how obviously correct I was with all of my decisions? Well, we're going to be using a couple of things. We're going to be looking at Old World Rankings, a brilliant website. Not a sponsor of the channel, but I would really recommend looking at them. Not only do they have, a rankings for each country, or a lot of countries, I believe they're working on bringing more countries into it as more and more different sources of tournament data are becoming available. Maybe you don't care about where you rank or where other people rank, and that's super fine, completely, reasonable. It does have statistics, which is what we're going to be looking at today, so you can see how well certain factions are doing. But more importantly, it also shows you lists from people who've done well at events with the factions you're interested in. Do you want to know how to build the best Beastman list? Well, you can go to Old World Rankings, just double check, have a look at who's been winning events with them. You'll see the different lists that we've got there. So, great website, really would recommend checking it out. Starting off just with a quick look at what data this actually covers. I think the way that we want to do this is filter it down. You can't see on the screen here, but I'm filtering to when the Grand Cathay Arcane Journal was released. This is losing 1 or 2 weekends worth of events. I think it's 1 weekend's worth of events. But I don't think talking about the 1.5 events outside of Cathay being playable is super relevant, because that's the sort of game that we're in. So I've cut that 1 or 2 week of events off and just set it from July 5th. That's the results that we're looking at here. Now, what we can also do is we can turn off online events, which does skew things a little bit. We can also only look at 5+ round events. So not looking at single day events, looking more at 2-day events. Why is this important? Well, you know what? Let's have a look at the UK's results specifically. Give me 2 seconds. So, just to start with here, this is great data. If I wanted to pretend that I was definitely right and skew the stats to make it look good for me, I could just have a look at the results in the UK. No other filtering other than from when Grand Cathay was out, and we can have a look at anyone, and this is only showing 10+ appearances, you can see here. So we're trying to cut out anything that doesn't have enough tournament games to make sure that there's a reasonable amount of data there, at least, even if it's not a hugely massive sample size. Well, isn't that interesting? Errantry Crusade are #1 in terms of the Bretonnian factions. That's exactly what I predicted. How could that possibly happen? Look, they've got a 60% win rate. That's really good. 35 games over 11 events. That's pretty decent stats. Let's have a look at the lists and how they've been doing so well. Apologies, the cropping is a little bit small, but I wanted to get all the information on here. You can see I've gone to the top army list section. I've filtered it to just the Grand Cathay onwards data here. I've got all events ticked so far, and we've filtered it down to Errantry Crusade. You can't see it off on the left, but you can see here the faction. We've got Errantry Crusade showing. What does that show us? Well, there's been 3 people have gone 3-0 at an RTT, one day 3-game event. That's really good. That's great. But there's only 1 single 5-game event in there. And at that event, the Bretonnian player didn't do that well. They didn't do badly. They had a decent showing. They went 3-1-1. And given the size of the Saffron Slam, I actually can't remember off the top of my head. In fact, let's just have a look. How did they do at the Saffron Slam? They came 6th, which is not bad. But when we're talking about the faction as being the second best faction in the UK, if we don't do some more filtering, well, actually the stats start to look a little bit skew-if, because only having a 6th place finish at a 2-day event and then winning some smaller events, not necessarily representative of the actual strength of the list. Why are we saying that? Well, a 1-day event is much easier to win than a 2-day event. And again, this is not to degenerate the players or anything like that. This is just sort of in terms of why I don't personally think 1-day events are super relevant in terms of the data you get from it, because it's a lot easier to dodge difficult matchups, or you might find that you play worse players, you might find that you don't play... You'll dodge a lot of difficulty, or you can dodge a lot of difficulty, and sometimes getting a good run at an RTT is less about, you know, are you the best player at the event, and it can be more about, did you dodge the other good players at the event. If there's 30 people, for example, and all you need to do is win 3 of those games, you'll find that you probably don't play against all of the best players there. So it's easier to win a 3-game event. You'll find that as well if you go to 2-day events. You know, your first 3 games might be really easy, but then you get into day 2 and there's only sort of 4 people left who are undefeated, and then your next 2 games are going to be against people who are going to be more difficult to beat. So in terms of stats, I don't think 1-day events are super relevant in terms of how the faction does, because it's to some degree less about the faction, although the faction is important, and more about player skill, and then also what luck you had in pairings and the run you had. Obviously, there's still luck involved in a 2-day event, but it's harder to get lucky all the way through and dodge difficult matchups. So why don't we look at just the 2-game events, the 2-day events with 5 games or more? Well, that's got its issues as well. Why am I going through this? I think it's really important to understand that this video is not here to tell you that objectively this army is the best. I've tried to really hammer that home, and we're going to start talking about the fun stuff in a second. But if I filtered to just the 5-round events, you can see here that actually here in the UK, across the last 6 or 7 weekends, we only have 3 factions that have enough event appearances, because there have to have been at least 10 people playing each faction to get you there. So we can't just look at what we've got here, otherwise we'd only have Vampire Counts, Orcs and Goblins, and Warriors of Chaos being played. So not super useful here in the UK. So we're going to spread the net a little bit wider and just take some general thoughts about the results that we're seeing. Let's have a quick look at faction representation at tournaments. And again, this is just filtering to the whole world. I've included online events, so there's a lot of flexibility in what people can play. This is for 3-game events. This is for 5-game events. This is just everything. You know, no filtering here. We're just seeing everything that we've got. So we can start off. You can see that Warriors of Chaos, 206 events have been, or 206 players at events. It's a lot of tournament wins, or tournament attendances, I should say, alongside. There are some Heralds of Darkness and Wolves in the Sea. So Warriors of Chaos being up there, not particularly surprising. Dwarves, really high, 182. That's a little surprising to me. I know they're popular, and we see a lot of them here. It feels like if you go to the Tsn Arena, you'll see maybe more dwarf players than you would expect to across a normal representation, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe dwarves are just that popular. Obviously, we've got Bretonnians, Orcs and Goblins, Empire of Man. None of these are particularly surprising. Tomb Kings, pretty up there. High Elves, Vampire Counts doing pretty well in terms of representation. Beastmen as well. Then we start to drop a little bit. Wood Elves, higher than I thought it would be. You've got half as many, or yeah, basically half as many Wood Elf players as you do Warriors of Chaos players. I think that's wild, because I would not be surprised to see, you know, at a 24-person tournament, I would not be surprised to see 2 or 3 Warriors of Chaos players. I would not always expect to see at least 1 Wood Elf player, so good on the Wood Elf players for having representation, you know, getting out there and playing some games. We'll see how they've been doing in terms of the win rate later on. Grand Cathay, only 74 appearances, definitely some hobby lag there, but this number is going to shoot up. Hugely popular faction. Some people have been put off by how strong the balloons are, but it's a faction that has brought people into the game. We're going to see a lot of people bringing Cathay. Dark Elves, 43 appearances. Incredible, honestly. Very impressive. I didn't know that there were 43 players who owned Dark Elves at this point. One of them's me, so repping the Dark Elves there. Lizardmen, Chaos Dwarves, Demons, Skaven, and then just off screen here, Ogre Kingdoms. All with low representation, but still, you know, still there in terms of actually being taken to tournaments. I think that's all of the factions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 16, 17. Off the top of my head, 17 sounds about right in terms of factions now that we've got Cathay. Yeah, so I don't think we're missing anyone there. But we can also expand the sub-factions, and we can see them here if I go... Oh, that's only on the faction performance. Okay, so I guess it wouldn't make too much difference to show them down here in terms of showing the sub-factions. So let's start looking at the actual win rates, just globally, not filtering anything down, and see how that lines up with my predictions to start off with. So to start with, put Tomb Kings up there above Cathay. Interesting. Did we not have... No, we had Cathay there, but we had them below Tomb Kings and Bretonnians. Interesting. I'll have to go back and double check the reasoning on that one, because that feels pretty stupid, honestly, at this point. But I've got Mortuary Cult and Grand Army up at the top, and Errantry Crusade and Bretonnian Exiles up behind them. And I should say, this was a collaborative tier list. Shout out to Pash Hammer, who did the tier list with me. There was some umming and ahhing. The one thing that I disagreed with is I want to put vampire counts higher up than he did. I do remember that. But Errantry Crusade being this high, that's all me. I can't blame him for that one. That's my personal decision to be there. So we're looking at S tier, Mortuary Cult, Grand Army, and then Errantry Crusade, Bretonnian Exiles, and Cathay up in the S tier. And this was relatively in order as well. So let's have a look at how we managed to do. So some quite surprising results here that I wasn't necessarily expecting to see. So up at number 1, we've got Wolves of the Sea, with a 59.3% win rate. This is 15 players have gone to an event with them, and or there's been 15 logged event with Wolves of the Sea. That's a pretty decent sample size, honestly. I'd be interested to see whether that was mostly RTTs or GTs, but not a bad showing there. And then we've got Nikaran Royal Host, which is the only Tomb Kings faction that I didn't pick to put in S tier, so that's not looking great for me. Again, gonna have to look at that one and see if that's in terms of people winning RTTs with them, or if they're doing well with, you know, having success with them outside of the smaller events. Trajan Warhost, a faction that I definitely did not put super high up, 55% win rate, which, keep in mind, if we're looking at win rates, 50% is not the average. There are a decent amount of draws in this game, so the actual average win rate is probably somewhere around 47 to 48% off. I don't know what the exact is, but it'll be somewhere around there if you factor in draws as well. So Trajan Warhost doing really well with, again, 15 events they've attended with 56 games in there. Now, Grand Cathay, this is a huge sample size. This is 74 in the context of Old World. This is 74 events with 268 games, and they're coming in at 55% win rate. Now, if we look at all of the other ones, we're looking at roughly 10 to 15 events where people have been taking these 3-2. So much smaller sample size, much easier for someone who's good at the game to go to 1 or 2 tournaments and to skew the faction data by just doing well with them. But Grand Cathay, larger sample size, more relevant data. Then we've got Wild Herd. Wild Herd's doing pretty decently. This is a slightly larger sample size again, 26 events. We're looking at 54% win rate, much higher than I was expecting it to be, actually. Wild Herd doing well. Obviously, with the changes to Magic, the fact that they've got really consistent pluses to Magic, you can cast with +4 on your level 4 wizards, or, you know, a level 1 wizard can cast at +3 between the Herdstone and the Wild Herd bonus. So not surprising to see them doing well, but I think that's higher than I expect them to be. And then the last faction that we've got above the sort of cutoff for overpowered in terms of the way they've sorted their win rate on Old World rankings is Bretonnian Exiles. So with retrospect, not super surprising to me to see that Exiles are doing well. And again, this is quite a large sample size. There's 60 players, almost 220 games. They're doing pretty well. A good range of scores there. Something else to look at, and maybe not something that I'll dig into at the moment, is the range. You can see here how spread the results are. So for Wolves of the Sea, there's a really big spread there on the range, but if you go down to Grand Cathay, it's a slightly tighter spread. For Trajan Warhost, really tight spread actually in comparison. So lots of statistics that we can dig into, but maybe something to look at in a future point when I've had more chance to sort of sit down and compare what things looks like. And also once the meta's stabilized a little bit more. So going back to the tier list, first of all, Mortuary Cult I had at number 1. Sitting only at a 50.4% win rate. So this is a reasonable sample size, 30 events, 113 games. So this is probably roughly where it should be sitting. So I think I've definitely overshot on Mortuary Cult. Maybe they need to be moved down to A tier. This is something that sort of follows up with my opinion on Mortuary Cult and Tomb Kings in general the more I play in 1.5. I think they're good. I think they have good matchups. I think they play well into Cathay. But I don't necessarily think that they actually play super well into the entire meta. I think they've got mostly good or decent matchups, but they've got some really poor matchups. You know, the undead versus undead matchup's always going to be difficult, and that does hurt their win rate in a way. So, yeah, this feels about right. Maybe sort of top of A tier is where I'd put them, and maybe towards the end, what I'll do is I'll reorder the tier list with looking at the stats and how I feel about the factions and give you an updated vibe of where the meta is. Second of all, we're looking at Grand Army Tomb Kings, and that's actually down at 47.7% win rate. So, again, 96 events, 331 games. This is a large sample size. With the starter factions, Bretonnia and Tomb Kings, there is a risk that because it's easy for people to get into the game with these factions, they might have bought them and started, they might not be necessarily as skilled tournament players. I think at this point, 1.5 years into the game being out, or coming up towards 2 years, that's less of a factor to take into account. And I'm only really mentioning it because it's the sort of thing that people would bring up to say, oh, actually Tomb Kings are better than this, but they're being dragged down by newer players. There may be some level of truth to that, but I don't think it's a huge thing. So, you know, this is still, in my eyes, an A-tier faction. They're still doing really well, but maybe not, again, having that width of play into the full meta. So struggling a little bit in terms of into some of the other top armies, but not doing too badly. 47.7%, still at or above, you know, a 50% win rate once you account for draws, in my opinion. Then we've got Bretonians. I put Errantry Crusade on here, and I don't know where Errantry Crusade is going to be. Are they even on here? Oh, yes, they are. Okay, 47.8, so just above Tomb Kings. Honestly, I think this might be too high for Errantry Crusade. They are, you know, still Bretonians. They still have the really good things about them, but I don't know that there's actually enough in there to boost them. I think middle of A tier is roughly where I would consider putting this sort of faction. I can't see them being anywhere higher than sort of middle of A, and I definitely overshot with my expectation of Errantry Crusade being the best. As much as I love the idea of Foot Knights charging up to 13 inches, it's not reliable, and those Foot Knights, actually, I don't think they bring quite as much as I'd like to see them bring, compared to a faction like Exiles, Bretonnian Exiles, where you can just bring the Yeomen at Arms, which are so much cheaper than the Knights, and do honestly a comparable job, point for point. So, yeah, Errantry Crusade, lower than I thought, but still pretty decent. They are Bretonians after all. Grand Cathay. Now, this is a faction that is, even though it's, you know, it's up there with a high win rate, 55%, this is a faction that I think has a lower win rate than you might expect them to. And I think players who have, once they've had chance to play them, when people sort of standardize their lists a little bit more, if people aren't taking sort of fluffier lists where maybe they're taking, instead of balloons, they're taking the Jade Sentinels or something like that, I think this win rate's going to go up quite a bit. But if you look at where it is, you know, 4th is not too bad. Let's just very quickly filter it to just 5-round events. Oh, look, there we go. It's still up there, but it's maintaining its strength, even though a lot of the smaller factions don't have the representation there. So Grand Cathay up at number 1 if you look at just the 5-round events, or if you look at all events and you factor in the smaller events where people maybe don't bring all of the best armies all of the time, still looking very solid. So realistically, Grand Cathay probably moving to the number 1 slot on my tier list. You know, the top of the S tier, I think it's pretty safe to call that one there. Okay, so keeping a vague track here of the armies and the tier list as I would update it, let's go back to what we had previously and talk about the A tier now. So previously, A tier, we'd put in Bretonnia Grand Army, Warriors of Chaos Grand Army, Vampire Counts, Tracian War Host, Tomb Kings Royal Host, Orcs and Goblins Grand Army, Dwarves, both Royal Host and Grand Army, Beastmen, both Grand Army and Wild Herd, and then High Elves as well. This feels pretty okay, I think. I immediately look at this and go, actually, High Elves, I feel like might want to move back down. Tracian Warhost, I'm pretty happy with where it is in A tier. Grand Army feels like that probably wants to go down. Other than that, maybe one of the Dwarves want to drop down, but I think across the board that's pretty good. Although Vampire Counts, I definitely want to move up. I feel like they're a really solid army. And Bretonnian Grand Army probably doesn't move up, probably just stays where it is. I think it has some limitations that Exiles don't particularly have. But let's go and have a look at the stats. So starting off here, we've got Kingdom of Bretonnia, it's 46.8%, so that's below, the Tomb Kings list. Interestingly, below Errantry Crusade. I really am going to have a look at those lists and see what I'm missing. But yeah, this feels about right. So solidly A tier, I feel like, around that 50% win rate once you account for draws. Feeling pretty solid in terms of that one there. Warriors of Chaos, though, where are they? Are they significantly lower? Warriors of Chaos are one of those factions that I think is suffering more than I thought they would. Do they deserve to stay in the A tier? It's hard to say. I think that they really struggle into Cathay. I think they're okay into the undead factions. It's not a winning matchup necessarily, but you've got enough pressure that you can crack the big bricks. I don't know that they play super well. They struggle into Bretonians as well. So maybe that just means that they actually move down a tier. Maybe that's the hot take that we've got to go with. But yeah, Warriors of Chaos not looking as good as expected there. Let's have a look at the dwarves that we've got here. Oh no, where are the dwarves? Okay, so Royal Clan sitting around where Warriors of Chaos is. So they're going to go in the same tier, wherever that would be. And then we've got, where's the Grand Army Dwarves? Dwarven Mountain Holds. Alright, this is low. I think the build that I have in mind, and there's going to be WTC content coming out. Obviously, the list lock is coming up very soon. I think it's today. So I'm not necessarily going to talk about why I think dwarves are maybe still up there as a tier army, although everyone's going to be locked in for international play anyway. But once the international lists come out, I'll definitely be having a look at those, seeing the different spices and variations of what people are bringing. Maybe that's something that we can look at next Thursday, something along those lines. So, yeah, Dwarven Mountain Holds, I think their stats are lower than they should be, and the reason for that is the good list is not necessarily what people are playing. Dwarves are one of those factions that you might get more beginner players into, and I don't mean necessarily people who get it as their first army, but people who are not necessarily playing an army at a tournament with the goal of winning. They're going because they enjoy the faction and they want to do well, but it's not, I want to win 5 games at an event. What army should I bring? Oh, let's swap over to Cathay or, something like that. So I think dwarves here, lower than they should be. So I'm going to keep them up in A, but I think Royal Clan going down to B tier might be warranted, honestly. Feeling pretty okay with that one. Looking at vampire counts, this faction is lower in win rate than I think they should be, and I'm wondering if this is just that people are bringing a variety of lists. There's a lot of people going to events with vampire counts, and I think to get the most out of them, it's not the easiest faction to play, but I think they really are just an excellent list. And obviously when we're talking about the tier list, normally the way that I contextualize it is, good players or the best players playing a faction. How will they do with a faction there? And I think vampire counts are maybe a little higher than their win rate would suggest, but the win rate is also not particularly low. So yeah, I think vampire counts, I'm going to move up to S tier. It's where I wanted them to be beforehand, but the faction stats say that they're still at least solid around that top of A tier, if not bottom of S tier, either way. Orcs and Goblins are another faction that I think are hindered a little bit by the player base not playing the faction necessarily to win events. And I do want to be clear, that's not a negative. That's absolutely fine. I love that people go to events and find fun in it through all of the different ways. You don't have to go to an event with the goal of winning all of your games to enjoy it. If that was the case, there'd be a lot less people going to tournaments, and it's great to see a good spread of people. So I don't want to make it sound like if I'm saying that there's a lot of players who play Orcs and Goblins who aren't necessarily going to events to win, that's a bad thing. But Orcs and Goblins is one of those classic factions where people will go to an event or will play the faction because they love them, and they will have more fun at the tabletop than you or I if you don't play Orcs and Goblins. I think Orc players typically are the most enthusiastic across every version of Warhammer I've played. So yeah, seeing them a little bit lower than I would necessarily rank them is probably not surprising. I also think they're a faction that to some degree suffers from having quite a wide spread of options that they can go for. When you've got a book with, when we were talking about them in the tier list on Tuesday, they've got goblins, they've got night goblins, they've got orcs, they've got black orcs, they've got squig herds, they've got something else in there. And that we're just talking infantry corps. Already you're at 5 or 6 options there, which is a ludicrous amount of choice when you could just be going with, potentially you're playing Grand Army, I don't know, Grand Army Bretonians, and you've got much more restricted choice, and they're also more prescriptive. It's very obvious what each unit's meant to do. You've got your cheap filler infantry. They're going to be cheap filler infantry. You've got your skirmish shooting infantry. They fill a role. Whereas for Orcs and Goblins, they're a little bit more widespread, and there's a lot of overlap between them. So I think it's easier for them to have poorer results, but I actually do think that Orcs and Goblins are still an A-tier faction, and this is where you start to see some of the issues with, you know, doing this and trying to be like, oh, objectively, I think this faction is here because of the stats. I'm using the stats to inform the opinions in all of the games that I've played and seen and watched. So I think Orcs and Goblins still A-tier. I think an army where you're building lots of, you know, 3 or 4 bricks of night goblins, war machines, that sort of list is still very good. And if you play other things, maybe it is further down the tier list than I would say. Going through and having a quick look at the Tracian Warhost placings, because this is a faction that's actually performing higher than I would expect them to do. There are a lot of RTTs here, but there's a decent sprinkling of 5-game events in there as well. Not as many as I'd like to see, but, you know, there's a few in there. Now, they haven't had a medal placing at any 5-round event, so that's maybe limiting them in terms of where I think they should actually go. But I think you can see here at the 5-game events, we've got them doing, you know, 3 and 2 coming in 5th, 3 and 2 coming in 5th. This feels like a very solid A-tier army for me. The Tracian Warhost, maybe it struggles in some matchups. Maybe it doesn't have the reach to push for a win in all matchups, if that's what you're looking for, which is quite important if you're looking for tournament wins in a 5-game, you know, blind tournament. But I really do like them as a faction, and I think I feel pretty happy with them sitting around in A tier, even though if we just go back to the statistics, let's have a quick look here. Arguably, you should say that they were up in S tier, but I just don't think that rings true for my experience playing as them or playing against them. So going against the stats here, but I think I'm pretty happy to leave them in the A tier where they were previously rated. Royal Host and Beastmen. These are the two things in A tier that I haven't looked at yet. But Royal Host, again, not having a huge number of event wins, but doing pretty well at them. But again, I think mostly RTTs. We'll have a look at that one in a second. And we've also got Beastmen. So we've got the Wild Herd really performing well up here. 54%, maybe a faction that should be moved up to S tier. And I think I could justify moving it up to S tier. It feels like the reach and the punch that it has with the Vile Tide, where you're getting +2 to cast, you're getting very consistent bonuses there. That feels like a solid faction to move up. And then we've also got the regular Beastmen, 47%. That feels pretty like it rings true in terms of sitting around in the A tier where it was previously. How many tournament events? 26 events for Wild Herd. That's not bad. I think. And I don't know if I 100% agree that Wild Herd are an S-tier army, but I think for the sake of what we're looking at in this video, I can justify moving a Wild Herd up to S-tier and leaving Beastmen Grey Herds where they are in A-tier. Now, before we move on, I'm going to have a quick look at the Nakaran Royal Hosts list, because I don't know that I necessarily agree they're an S-tier army. Let's have a look. So, just filtering down to the result placings, it's a pretty impressive showing. That's, you know, 2 wins up here, you can see, at RTTs, the 3-game events. 3 bronze medals at RTTs. One of them, someone going undefeated, so just not, you know, scoring high enough points in there, which makes sense because Royal Host can struggle to get as many points in a game as some of the others. 4-1 at a 5-game event, 3-1-1 at a 5-game event, and then a couple of poor results down here, but you don't expect everyone to always do well with the faction. Honestly, looks pretty solid. I mean, if we just look at the lists, I'm not sure if this will come up super well here. Yeah, so there's Anthony Solari with a really interesting looking list. Hold on, let me see if I can bring this onto page a little more. Yeah, here we go. Look at this list. This is 8 Tomb Guard chariots, some regular chariots, some more Tomb Guard chariots, and then some chaff. This is not the direction that I expected this sort of army to go into, and I'd be really interested to see how it plays out on the tabletop. I think this is really fun. Let's have a look at maybe a couple of these gold medal events here. So we've got Tomb King, 1 on a dragon, 1 on a chariot. Tomb Guard chariots, Ushabti. Oh, this is very straightforward from Andrew Cesar. Okay, and then let's have a look at Oliver Jones. This is Tomb King on a chariot, Mort Priest, Royal Herald, chariots, infantry cohort, but not that big. Tomb Guard on foot, Necropolis Knights. Some real variety in these factions, in the Nakaran Royal Host lists. I think this is really interesting. This is not a faction that I would say that I understand to a deep level, specifically Royal Hosts. I think it's something that I need to spend more time looking at and playtesting, because specifically the other two lists, like this one's fun. It's got a lot of different stuff in there. This is more of like a Tomb King's list, but through the lens of Royal Host. But like the like Anthony Solari's list, especially with the 2 units of the Tomb Guard chariots, I think that's really fun. I want to find out more about that one. So I'll look into that one potentially. But yeah, I think due to the low number of players, maybe this is less about it being an S tier faction and more about it being a decent faction but played well. Like, I recognize a good number of the names in here. You know, this is not, you know, Scott Reed, Team England, Oliver Jones, Team Wales, Anthony Solari, I don't necessarily know, but did well enough to attend the Masters, you know, with the same list here. So I think it's maybe a good quantity of good players that are carrying a decent army to heights. But yeah, definitely one that I'm going to look into more. I'm going to leave them in A tier for now. But if in 3 to 6 months' time we see that Royal Host is the number 1 way to play Tomb Kings, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. That'd be fun. I like the direction these lists are going in. I'm going to have to see if I can talk to some of the people who are writing these absolutely wild lists. So coming to the end of the A tier, I can't remember if I looked at the stats of the High Elf Grand Army, but definitely one that needed moving down. You can see here that this has reshaped it a little bit. We've got less in S tier, moved some of those Tomb Kings and the Grand Army Bretts down, or the Errantry Bretts down, I should say. Beastmen have moved up, and then we've got Grand Army, High Elves, and Warriors of Chaos, and Royal Clans Dwarves moving down as well. And I feel pretty okay with this. So let's have a look at what we had in B tier previously. B tier. A lot of Wood Elves, Grand Army Wood Elves. We've got the Wild Hunt Wood Elves as well. Heralds of Darkness, Warriors of Chaos. Empire, City State of Nuln. This is definitely wrong. This one needs to move up. This is a fantastic army. I think we're going to have a fun discussion about that when we get to looking at some of the, you know, I know some nations are bringing Nuln, and it'll be fun to talk about those. Expeditionary Force, Wolves of the Sea, Nomadic War, and then Chaos Dwarves Grand Army as well. Yeah, so let's have a quick look at where those factions are sat. Starting off with Wood Elves. Where are we with Wood Elves? So General Wood Elves, not looking good. 37.9% win rate. I think this probably has to move down a tier, unfortunately. Really struggling. That's 85 events with 293 games played. They're just struggling in the meta as it stands. I think you can do well with Wood Elves, and I think you can play them well, but I think you have to work a lot harder to get the same results with this faction. And I think it doesn't have the high heights of some of the other sort of like high skill intensive factions do. What I do like, though, Orion's Wild Hunt. A solid, how many percent? 37 to 42. So it's over 5% better. This is a huge leap. And I do feel like Orion's Wild Hunt is probably the best way to play Wood Elves at the moment. And this is really interesting to see. Now, I will say only 10 events and 35 games played, but I still do think this is a really solid way to play Wood Elves. It doesn't necessarily always beat the better armies, but I think it punches up really well into stuff in B tier and below, and then anything that's in A tier is still playable, and then the stuff that's in S tier is maybe a little bit difficult for you to interact with. But a lot of fun stuff you can do with Wood Elves, and it's a faction that I keep playing around with. I have, I think, 4 coaching students who are all playing Wood Elves at the moment, so it's definitely one that I've been digging into with some real depth, a really fun faction there. So I think Wild Hunt staying in B feels pretty good. Wood Elf Realms going down to C tier. Unfortunate, but probably fair for them there. Expeditionary Force, 42.6% win rate. Interestingly, over both Royal Clan and Dwarven Mountain Holds. Now, I don't necessarily think that it's super spicy. Although actually, sorry, I've mixed up my factions. No, this is the best way to play Dwarves, and I do need to just go into here and move the Grand Army down. My apologies, I was getting mixed up. Yes, Royal Clan, not Royal Clan, Expeditionary Host does need to move up there. So let's just do that. Heralds of Darkness. This is a faction that I think is actually performing reasonably well, but I think it's more due to the people who are taking it. Let me just find the stats on that one. Oh, do we not even have... Oh, no, there we go. Heralds of Darkness. It is sat higher than regular Warriors of Chaos. This is definitely to do with the people who are playing it and not necessarily the faction. Only 13 events there. Warriors of Chaos, 178. So there's much lower... Heralds is still a worse way to play the faction. Unfortunately, it's one of my favourites. I love the counter-charging Chosen Chariots, but the stats do lie here to some degree because we've got a much larger sample size there. Honestly, Warriors of Chaos are probably where they should be, and then these Heralds of Darkness should probably be down, sat around where Empire are, unfortunately. But with only 13 events, it's probably just people who are pretty decent at the game taking them there. So Herald probably... Well, it definitely needs to be below Warriors of Chaos, so maybe that one moves down. Something to look into. City-State of Nuln, though, look at that, 51.6%. I was wrong on City-State of Nuln. This is going to go up in the rankings. This is easily an A-tier army. You can bring so many guns, and the game is skewing more towards ranged firepower, with Cathay being so good, with other factions like Dwarves and Empire being able to bring so much artillery and just range pressure. Nuln is really solid. It might even go up to S tier. That might be my hot take for this video, that Nuln goes up to S. In fact, let's just do that one now. We're going to go City-State and Nuln up there in S tier, and we are going to go, while we're tracking it, let's put Herald's Darkness probably the bottom of B tier, if not C tier. In fact, I might just have to move it down to C tier. It makes me sad, but it might well be sat down there. Moving on, we've got Nomadic War, which is sat at 42.9% win rate. So that probably feels about right, in that it's a little bit below 50% once you factor for draws. It's not the best way to play Orcs and Goblins, realistically, but it's not awful. It has tools to deal with massed infantry, and I think that feels pretty right for a B tier faction. I can leave that one there pretty happily. Chaos Dwarves, though. Chaos Dwarves sat at a 39.2% win rate, with a decent amount of games played. That's 120 games played. I don't know if that needs to move down to C tier, but if it stays in B, it has to stay towards the bottom of C tier, B tier. Definitely not one that I'm excited to put on the table. I have been trying to build good lists for it, but I really do struggle to find a good spot for it. Oh, I'm not even on the right screen. Yes, so as you can see here, 35 events played, 120 games total, 39% win rate, not looking solid. Whereas Nomadic War up here, 42.9%. With 17 events, which is an okay amount of games played. So yeah, not going to win any events, but you can probably go 3-2 pretty comfortably at a 5-game event with Nomadic War. Something along those lines feels pretty solid. Finally, in this tier, we've got Wolves of the Sea, and there's 15 events here, which is not a small sample size, with a 59.3% win rate. This, I think, has to be to do with the events that they're at. So let's have a quick look here and show you how they've been doing. Is it just because they're going to lots of small events? No, actually, they're doing pretty well in terms of a couple of 5-game event wins, or 1 win, 1/3, a couple of RTT wins, a second and an RTT, 3-2 at a 5-game event. This is not a bad showing for Wolves of the Sea. Maybe I need to... Again, I think these are decent players, or good players. We've obviously got the good doctor here, Dr. Luke Blackthall, who has won an event with Wolves of the Sea, and Michael, who I don't actually recognise Michael's name, but and then obviously Team England, Stephen Toll, doing well, winning an RTT there with Wolves of the Sea as well. So maybe this one again is just that the faction is being played by people who are good at the game, but that's not a bad spread of results for Wolves of the Sea. I don't think it makes it into S tier, but I think I can comfortably put this in top or middle of A. That's weird though, because I don't know that I think that this is a better way to play than Grand Army. Interesting. There's some interesting cognitive dissonance I'm having here, where the stats are telling me one thing and my personal beliefs are telling me another. So we're going to put Wolves of the Sea in here, maybe above Grand Army Orcs and Goblins, but below Mortuary Cult. I'm not sure they live in A tier, given that I've got B tier Grand Army Warriors of Chaos down there. Maybe I need to move Warriors of Chaos up. That's probably fair. Yeah, I think having them in the same tier probably feels right. And I don't know that I'm being super precise within the tier, but Okay, we'll come back to that one. We'll have a look at it later on. But that does take us, I think, to the end of the B tier. And now we're getting into the dregs. Let's have a look at what we had in C tier, which was Grand Army Empire. C tier, probably fine. If you want to play many guns, just play Nuln. Host of Talus and Wood Elves. Honestly, maybe I'm being too generous. Maybe they need to move down, because Wood Elves are already suffering, so they may need to go down to F tier. Dark Elves Grand Army. They're not as bad as I think they were. They might be bottom of B or top of C, but honestly, it's maybe top of C. I did go to one at an event with them that was a less serious event, so that I don't think my personal bias needs to be ignored there. It doesn't necessarily count for anything. Grand Army Lizardmen, Troll Horde. Troll Horde have got some surprising stats. We'll get onto those. Chaos Demons for Grand Army probably just need to move down, and then Empire Knightly Orders. I have no opinion on Empire Knightly Order. I'm going to trust the stats completely on this one. We'll see how we get to that. So let's have a look through at the other Empire Wood Elves, or just other elves, and then some monstrous armies, Lizardmen and Troll Horde as well, and then demons. Going straight into it, Empire of Man, 38.7% win rate. This feels lower than it should do, honestly. I don't know how Nuln is so much better to the point where I might want to put Nuln in S tier, and Empire, I'm like, do you even still live in C tier? But yeah, Empire, I think Empire's a faction that's brought down by the player base, not necessarily trying to play the most competitive lists all of the time. People love their state troops. Obviously, one unit of state troops with a Griffin banner is really good now. That second unit of state troops is where it falls down. So if someone wants to bring 3 bricks of state troops, maybe their list is a little bit less performative. But yeah, Empire, probably C tier, feels pretty okay for them. What about Knightly Order? Have there been enough people playing events of Knightly Order? Do I have to tick the box that says 10 plus appearances? Oh, yeah, 2 people have gone to events with Knightly Order and a 14.3% win rate. We can't really pull anything from that, but like I said, I don't have strong opinions on them, so maybe we just move them down to F tier. Maybe that is the answer. That's really rough. Poor Knightly Order, but at least they've got a good way to play in Nuln. Yeah, so let's just scooch those Empire over while we're doing it. Grand Army can sit here in C tier, probably worse than those two, but better than Grand Army Wood Elves, I would say. And then Empire Knightly Order just gonna languish down in F tier. The first F tier of the tier list redux. We'll see if it stays there. Maybe not. Let's give ourselves some whiplash. So we're gonna start down here with Dark Elves. 145 games played with a 34.5% win rate. That is tragic. You know what? Let's have a quick look at, are there any heroes out there who still play this faction? And I'm not including myself because my event was less competitive. So we'll ignore this one. It was there was only a few of us there. Shout out to Matt Willis going 3-2 with Dark Elves. Absolute hero of our time. Carlos and M coming, it's a 4-round event, which is weird, but coming 4th. Coming 3rd. Pretty solid there. We've got, yeah, some 2-1s. They feel like they can perform okay at RTTs, and then it does start to get into the slightly more sad stats further on down the line. But yeah, a huge shout out to Matt Willis, Carlos and M, and then everyone here in the 2-1 bracket. 3 people here in the UK repping the Dark Elves and doing okay at them with at RTT level. Big fan of that. Huge love for Dark Elves. I've now been to, I think it's 7 or 8 tournaments with Dark Elves, so definite bias in here. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that we've got to probably put them down in C tier. It doesn't feel great. I like them maybe more than Grand Army. You can do some fun stuff with Dark Elves, but they are a limited faction. That's completely fair to say. Anyway, I promised you some whiplash. Let's whiplash all the way back up to Troll Horde. And what the hell is going on here with Troll Horde? 51.1% win rate across 45 games. Now, that is a smaller sample size. Are the Troll Horde players all just going to 3-game events? Is that what's happening? This is blowing my mind, because I don't think there's... Oh, wow! Jordan McCarthy. Well done, Jordan. Winning a 5-round event with Troll Horde. And then also winning a... Okay, so it's actually just that Jordan's really good. Okay, this makes sense now. So Jordan has won 2 events with Troll Horde, and then other than that, we only have 2 1s at best, followed by 2 3s and 1 2s. Okay, I feel vindicated not putting them too high up. But yeah, absolute hero of Troll Horde, Jordan. Really, really good results there, and we can leave them probably maybe bottom of B tier is the place that they end up now that we've seen that someone can play them well and take them up. So a bit of an upgrade from where they were in C tier previously. Rounding out C tier, we've got Lizardman, and let's just keep scrolling. Yeah, Lizardman down here with 38 events and 36.4% win rate. Not looking solid, looking definitely like a C tier faction. Now, these results don't include Renegades, and it's funny because the Renegade rules objectively make Lizardman better, but if I go up and toggle on include Renegades, you can see down here, there's actually a worse win rate with the Renegades pack as opposed to the non-Renegades pack. I'm not 100% sure why. Again, small numbers of data make it very difficult to draw like actual good conclusions from. But yeah, I thought that was a funny thing to point out because the Lizardman Renegade rules are objectively stronger and much more playable than the regular Grand Army ones. But that's not what the stats say. So another example that you can't just follow the stats blindly. But yeah, Lizardman looking really poor. Definitely sat down there in C tier. And was there anyone else in C tier that we haven't got to? Oh, Hosts of Taliesin. Are they even on here? I'm not sure if enough people have played them. Let's filter down. Hosts of Taliesin. Huh. 6 events with a 52.4% win rate. Well, that's some small sample size alongside Bloodherd. Neither of these, I think, are representative of how the faction actually performs. But I think they both belong in C tier, and I hope to see people continuing to do well with them at tournaments. I'm just not expecting that to happen, given how my testing of the factions has looked. Chaos Demons are looking absolutely woeful down here, 36.2% win rate with 28 events. If we look at the Renegade rules for them, they are more playable. Whereabouts are they? Maybe there's not been enough people going. Oh, hey, Ma, that's me, Dark Elf Renegades. That's the event that I went to. But if we look at the Chaos Demons list, has no one played them with Renegade rules? Or are they just further up? Oh, wow. Apparently one of the best factions in the game. Again, not necessarily... There's a reason that we've got the, we've got this 10 plus appearances unticked and we haven't got the Renegades on there. But interesting to see them further up there. So I think Demons can realistically just sit in the C tier and maintain their place of mediocrity to round that one out. Finally, in F tier, I was definitely too harsh with Bloodherd initially. I don't think they're a good faction, but they can at least kill things because Minotaurs hit pretty hard. Grand Army, Seaguard Garrison, and Skaven Grand Army, I'm pretty comfortable saying that they're all going to sit here in F tier. Let's just have a quick look at the stats and see if they back up my my initially held opinions. Ogres have surprised me. I guess very similar to Bloodherd. At least they can hit pretty hard with the Iron Guts, and you can go for the Iron Gut Star, and there are some good units in there. So I think maybe putting them in F tier was too harsh. So I am willing to move those up to C tier. Skaven are the worst performing faction in the game, so they can absolutely stay where they were. And what was the last one? What else did we have? Ogre Kingdoms, Skaven. Oh yes, of course. We are going to have to turn this toggle off. Seaguard Garrison. 1 event, 3 games with a 1 in 3 win rate. Can't draw conclusive evidence from it, but that leans into my personal bias. That sounds right to me, so I'm going to say, yeah, you know what, Seaguard Garrison, definitely an F tier faction, which is a shame, because some really cool rules on there, or like cool units that I'd love to see played more, just a bit too restrictive in the way that it plays for a faction that's already struggling a little. So that takes us to the end of the rejig of the tier list. I think this is something that I'm not upset with. I don't hate this. I haven't really sorted within tiers, so it doesn't matter that, for example, Troll Horde's at the bottom of B and Wild Hunt's at the top of B. I was just trying to put them in roughly in order, but it's definitely got jumbled up over time. So yeah, I don't hate this. Do I think this is objectively correct? No. The more I play of 1.5, the more I realize that I have to keep overcoming preconceived notions about factions. You know, stuff like Troll Horde. I had thought Troll Horde was terrible. Turns out Troll Horde is maybe just okay. Yeah, that's not the most glowing of recommendations, but there's a lot of things that I, at face value, thought were going to be more of a problem, such as stupidity, which are still bad, but, you know, other than that, not as much of a downside as possible as I thought. I missed a couple of things, Wild Herd being as good as they were in City, State, and Null, both higher up the tier list than previously I thought they would have been. But yeah, I think this is better. This is an improved tier list, and I'm looking forward to coming back to this one maybe in 3 months' time. Maybe we do, what month are we in now? August, September, October, November. Maybe we do sort of like an end-of-year roundup and have a look at how things have looked from this point, whether, you know, the data sort of suggests that we're looking very similar there. Because, again, the data that we have isn't really conclusive. It's hard to draw opinions from what we have. Obviously, I can say, oh, well, the stats say this is this, and we could do a tier list there. In fact, maybe I should just put things into a tier list based on the stats, and we can, you know, put that up to compare and see if we agree with. I'll overlay that at the end of the video and see if you agree with that tier list more than the one that I've put together myself, where I've gone with informed by stats but also still based on my personal opinions. Are there going to be things that are wrong in here? Yeah, probably. There's probably a couple of things in here that could do with tweaking. Like, I'm not super confident on the dwarves. I haven't played enough dwarves in 1.5 to have a really solid understanding of where they should be. I feel like they should be better than the stats say they are. But, yeah, more testing needed. As always, plenty more games that I can play. And, yeah, loving 1.5 outside of the, you know, the balloon in the room, which hopefully is going to be addressed sooner rather than later. I think the game is in a pretty solid spot, and despite there being a lot of stuff down here at the bottom, the top half of the meta feels like it plays reasonably well together, and yeah, more balanced tweaks to bring up the worst stuff and curtail the top end would be nice, but we'll see what we get over the course of the rest of the year. Thank you for watching. Thank you for getting to the end of the video. If you've reached this point and you haven't already, I would really appreciate a like, a comment, a subscription if you haven't done those things. It just helps me get seen by more people, boost me up in the algorithm, all of the stuff that the YouTubers do like to say. If you would like to support me in my goal to become a full-time YouTuber, I would absolutely appreciate that. You can become a member below. There are various perks to those, name at the end of the videos, all that good stuff, but it also unlocks some VIP areas in Discord if you become a Longbeard or Grail Knight tier supporter. Those VIP sections are the only parts that are locked away in Discord. You don't have to be a member to join the Discord. I'd recommend that you should. We've got about 450, 500 people on there. It's a great place for discussion, a lot of fun. I do try and chime in as much as possible. And it's also where the Fix My List show lists are put, and also if you are one of the Grail Knight or Longbeard tier supporters, where you participate in choosing which list I play in the monthly Pick My List series.